Drinking life from a fire hose, it seems sometimes. Sound familiar? This is life in the A.S.A.P lane. If you're feeling anxious, stressed, addicted, pressured, you are not alone. In fact, there's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. Many aren't able to cope without the use of pills, alcohol, food, even retail therapy, shopping. The result is record levels of opioid overdose deaths, obesity levels, and teen suicide attempts. The good news is, there is an exit ramp, and your host, best-selling author, and former U.S. Congressman Alan Steelman will guide you to your very own exit. Alan's mission is to help you learn about and adopt strategies and techniques to restore balance and equilibrium to your life. You'll learn from Alan and his guests simple and practical stress-relieving techniques, and you will be inspired by numerous interviews with other people just like you, who have moved from stressed out to charged up, and from misery to mastery. You are cordially invited to join us and learn to live your life in joy and on purpose. Take a deep breath. Let's begin exiting the A.S.A.P lane with Alan.
Hello, everyone. This is Alan Steelman, and I am so delighted to have a very special guest on today's show. The topic is not a pleasant one, but it is a pervasive one in our society today. You know, Miranda Lambert, in her recent song, which, by the way, won the Song of the Year on the American Country Music Awards show, sang of the Tin Man, whom we all know from The Wizard of Oz, that fantasy story that we all saw first as children. And if you remember, the Tin Man wanted a new heart in order to be in love again. And so the lyrics go, "Hey there, Mr. Tin Man, you don't know how lucky you are. I've been on the road you're on, and it didn't get me very far. You ain't missing nothing 'cause love is so damn hard. Take it from me, darling, you don't want a heart. Hey there, Mr. Tin Man, I'm so glad we talked this out. You can take mine if you want it. It's in pieces now. By the way there, Mr. Tin Man, if you don't mind the scars, you give me your armor, and you can have my heart." By the way, I hope that the listeners appreciate that I didn't try to sing that, and I just read the lyrics to you. My guest today, as I mentioned, is a very special guest. Farahana Surya Namaskar is a published author. She's a speaker, and importantly for today's topic, she's a mindfulness and a divorce coach. She deals with the topic of love and heartbreak and all the personal trauma that goes with that. She has dealt with it in her personal life, and she helps others deal with it in her professional life. This is not an easy issue for someone to talk about, especially when it deals with their own life and the emotional wounds that are still fresh and somewhat raw. And for that reason, I'm especially indebted to Farahana for agreeing to be on today's show. Welcome, Farahana.
Thanks so much, Alan, for having me here. I'm so excited to speak to you and speak to our listeners today.
Very good. Well, just to illustrate, and I know this is known probably to most of our listeners already, but just to illustrate the depth and breadth of the divorce rate in America today, according to the American Psychological Association, approximately 1 of every 2 marriages end in divorce. And for those who divorce, the average marriage lasts about 8 years. The divorce rate in America is 3rd in the world, following only Belarus and the Maldives. And interestingly, even more second marriages end in divorce, which is up to approximately 65% now. So those are really some very alarming statistics. So, Farahana, could we start with, in your own case, do the sentiments expressed in Miranda Lambert's song resonate with you as ones that are fairly typical with someone going through a divorce?
You know, that's a really good question, and I was thinking about that earlier. I feel like this question would have been answered very, very differently if I was asked this question earlier on. So 3 years ago, when I decided this was the time and I wasn't able to follow through with my commitment.
And how long had you been married at this
I was
stage?
actually married exactly 7 years.
Wow. So the 8 years is pretty close to
Yes.
what was in your own case.
Yeah, so as I heard you saying that, I was thinking to myself, 7 years, very close. So exactly 7 years for me. When I say 7 years, it was the anniversary date, actually, our 7th year anniversary. So it's when we decided that we were no longer going to, go through with our relationship. And So, like I said, if you had asked me this question back in 2015, I think I would very much have agreed with the lyrics. Simply because I think at that point in your life, the wounds are so raw. This trauma has just happened to you, and I find that a lot of people would be in at the point where they're seeing themselves as a victim of something so traumatic. So it's kind of more of the questions that we keep asking ourselves is, why does this happen to me? We see that failure as, and for me at that time, it was the most, the epic failure of my life. Having gone through many failures, this was kind of the cherry on the top, we could say. So at that point in my life, I was very much in victim mode. 3 years later, the journey that I've walked on helps me answer this question in a very, very different way, where I kind of see my experiences as something that have taught me so much about myself that I didn't realize before. So, um, yeah.
So I know our listeners, and particularly those who may be either going through this now or have gone through it recently and where it is still raw, would you please share some of the techniques or methods or ways that you have used to deal with what you referred to as a very raw emotional moment in the very early days?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're going through it, when everything is really fresh, you really question the past. You question your mistakes. You're in that place where you're blaming a lot of the situation outside of yourself. So you're not necessarily taking responsibility. It's more somebody else who did you wrong. And so when you're in that place of victim mode, what I would ask my listeners to consider is, with every situation and experience, I'd like to use the phrase, it takes two to tango. So, you're not dancing this dance by yourself. You were in this relationship through your will. And how has this relationship transpired over the years in terms of going from a place where it was working into a place where it started to break down? Um, and I think it's very easy for us as individuals in life, with any circumstance, to kind of play that blame game and to take on the role of the victim. And when we do that, then we're not allowing ourselves an opportunity to really look inwardly as to, what are some of the things that I may or may not have done to contribute to the situation? What are the things that I could have done or considered that would have helped me grow, or that even at this point can help me grow and learn? I think mistakes in our lives are very, very important, because through mistakes we are able to learn and change and shift and grow. And so taking myself out of victim mode, first of all, was something. I used mindfulness as my mirror. I reference a mirror because for me, mindfulness helps me kind of look at myself and kind of look at where I'm at. Um, Otherwise, it became very easy for me to get stuck in the past and be anxious about the future.
Right.
So with the mindfulness, and without even realizing that I was practicing mindfulness at that time, but just realizing that I need to focus on what's going on right now, because there's nothing that I can really change about the past. And the anxiety that I felt about the untold and unknown future was really a worst case scenario that I was developing in my mind. So the story that I told myself in my mind was always a worst case scenario. And I needed to stop doing
Right.
that.
Well, mindfulness, just for our listeners who may not be familiar, is an umbrella term that refers to both yoga and meditation. And you are a mindfulness teacher among your other credentials. And there's a metaphor which some are familiar with, that yoga and meditation, or mindfulness, to use the term you used, will not change the external events that you're stressed and anxious and depressed about, but it does provide a surfboard to allow you to more calmly and rationally surf the choppy seas in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you might even refer to divorce as a tsunami, because it is a very difficult situation to deal with. So among other methods and techniques, you did use yoga and meditation as a way of helping you deal with this in a more calm and rational way.
Yes, I focus more on the meditation and awareness of the present moment. Haven't delved into yoga too much, but that's something I do want to at some point. But for now, and what kind of brought me to this point is the mindfulness and the meditation.
Right. You know, someone, just to divert for a moment, once drawing the distinction between prayer and meditation. That prayer is when we are talking to God, and meditation is when God is talking to us.
Right.
And through meditation, as you know from your own experience of being a teacher, if you can calm the agitated mind, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, maybe even jealousy that you have, so your spirit, where the angels of your higher nature reside, compassion, joy, generosity, gratitude, empathy, compassion, those are qualities that you were given at birth.
Yeah.
Those are your spiritual qualities. And if we can all just calm that monkey in our head that jumps around and makes us regret things from the past and worry about the future and just be here now, then through meditation, God can talk to us. Now, I know that, so thank you for sharing your own personal experience, but you also are a divorce counselor, so you're dealing with this from at least a once removed standpoint with others in your professional life. Could you talk about the range of issues, not only the emotional ones, but also the legal ones that someone has to deal with in going through something like this?
Absolutely. I think when you come to a point where you've decided that you're going to file for divorce, whether you're the petitioner or whether you're the respondent, there's a lot of emotions going on. There's a lot of mental stories that are going on. And one of the things that I knew that I had was legal representation. And, in order for somebody and my attorney to explain to me what were the next steps in terms of legalities and all of that. But where I wasn't, and I find that a lot of people would probably be in the same boat, is you're not in that space mentally and emotionally because you still are requiring the support. You're still requiring the space and the safe space to kind of flow through the emotions and the mental challenges that you're going through. I mean, there's a lot of things that you're carrying from the past, the stories in your head, again, the resentment, the anger, all of that, all the emotions that stem from fear is something that you're going through. And in order to be able to navigate yourself through the choppy seas that you refer to, I think it's really important. The oars that are going to kind of take you through those choppy seas are, the emotional support, the mental well-being. Like, where do we tap into that? What types of resources are available? And for me, I was in a position where financially I was really needed to be very watchful and mindful about how that money was spent. And I think for a lot of people, the one thing or the one place that you sacrifice that is the most need is that mental and emotional support. Because I think what you're trying to do at that point is just go into survivor mode. For me, it was immediately, I knew that I was becoming a single mom and I immediately had to get into survivor mode. So, if you're not employed, you're going to start looking for work. If, go for some skill, maybe some skill upgrading or whatever it is. But you go into that fight or flight and that survival mode, and you really overlook or just negate or don't set importance to that mental and emotional support that you really require during that time.
So your idea, which you've told me about, of helping law firms provide this emotional support as a service in addition to the legal advice, could you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Yes, I feel that if we were to be able to engage law firms and attorneys and family law firms in a way that they are providing resources or either providing resources or even providing services through collaborations with people like myself to bring that awareness of, first of all, why it's important to have this mental and emotional support, and then collaborate with individuals who are moving towards the direction of finding a way to bring mindfulness and meditation into the lives of their clients. I think that would be something that would be very beneficial to those law firms, not just in terms of providing the services to the clients, but I think that attorneys have to deal with very irate clients themselves, and that job for them to be in the place where they're the most effective and are at their best, it would be something that they could definitely benefit from themselves, because with mindfulness and meditation, we know, sitting here at the Center for Brain Health, that what's going on in our brain, the functionality of it can be deeply impacted in a positive manner when we practice mindfulness and meditation.
Okay, so segueing back to the song by Miranda Lambert, it sounded like she's just given up on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too damn hard, she said.
Mm-hmm.
So in your own case, do you see yourself as having dealt with a broken heart once and it's just too damn hard, you don't ever want to mess with it again?
I would say I've dealt with several broken hearts, even prior to getting married. So first of all, I think, it's not the broken heart didn't just come from the marriage. But, one of the things that I've learned is, just like the Wizard of Oz, in the story of the Tin Man, I think that our heart, we cannot gift our heart to somebody else before gifting it to ourselves. We cannot put the onus on somebody else to love us the way we wish to be loved without loving ourselves that way. And so the past 3 years has really taught me to recognize that perhaps everything that I am seeking outside of myself actually exists within me. And so
Yes.
just, being able to kind of go back inward and see how many times I put the onus or responsibility on somebody else to provide me with something that I required or needed or thought that there was a lack of. The past 3 years has been on this journey to discover all the gifts that I have inside of me, but I never gave myself an opportunity to tap into those gifts.
Well, it is such a painful experience that a significant number do resort to false wizards, to reference the Wizard of Oz story. We all remember the wizard in the story turned out to be a wrinkled up little old man who couldn't do anything for you, for Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and the Scarecrow. And the moral, of course, was that we have within us already everything we need. So it sounds like in your case, as painful as it was, your journey has been one of going within to find the answer to this for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. The mindfulness and the meditation piece, I always tell my clients, was that inward journey, and then my writing. I came up with a lot of writing, and I was expressing myself. So there was the inward journey through mindfulness and meditation, and through writing, I came with my outward expression of anything that I found was going on, and I wanted to express through words. In fact, I've self-published also a poetry book called The Healing Power of Words, and just the title itself, I believe, and I chose that title because it speaks volumes. When you write, when you bring out all the emotions and everything that's going on in the experiences, you're able to, almost release a lot of the stuff that has been stuck within you for such a long time. So writing has been deeply healing for me as well.
There's an old adage, I should say, that love is a fever cured quickly by marriage. And of course, the divorce rate would suggest that it is important to consider other factors than just, the passion or whatever it may be at a given time, such as how compatible are we, how well do our personalities match, can I be a good friend with this person? Uh, can you reflect a bit on what other factors should be considered when someone is thinking about getting married to someone else?
I think that, a lot of society has kind of built this perspective and this notion that has become so normalized, that we should go out and look for the one, the one being the soulmate that is a missing piece of the puzzle. And lines from movies and songs like, "You complete me," have
Right.
become so normalized that people are in this search and this desperate search to go find the one. And I read somewhere, or it might have been a post on social media. It's, how often are we looking for the one, and how about we turn that around and start building ourselves up to be the one. Um, I read somewhere else, and especially because I'm a single mom raising a boy, um, you know, you're looking for that perfect man, or but are you raising that man? And so the standards with which, and the lessons and the values and the just that we're raising our boys with, what does that kind of look like? Because I think that at the end of the day, there is also a lot of pressure, and I have to admit this. I think that there's a lot of pressure on men to be that, the person who's going to come in and save the day. And I think that's a lot of pressure, and vice versa. I think gender roles plays a huge part in this. Is what are the expectations that we have of the person of the opposite sex, or, yeah, regardless of, depending on what type of relationship you're in. There's this expectation of the other person to do right by you, and I think that has been so heavily coded into our brains that when that person doesn't meet that criteria or meet those expectations, and there's disappointment.
Yeah.
Um, so, again, just like every character in the book of The Wizard of Oz, we have what we need. It's within us innately. We were brought into this world, I truly believe, with everything that we're going to need, with all the tools. It's just a matter of first knowing that. A, know that you have everything that you're looking for. B, identify what those tools are. And C, then go about and apply them. I read in this beautiful book, which I know you're very familiar with, is Conversations with God, where Neil Donald Walsh talks about concepts, and God speaks to Neil about concepts. So when we talk about the concept of kindness, or we talk about the concept of forgiveness, these are all words. And up until we don't put action behind them and turn them into experience, do we truly not know what that means and the impact that can have in both our lives and as well as somebody else's life. So when we're discovering what these tools are that I was talking about, it's like I imagine having this toolbox, like that I would get from Home Depot, and we have various different tools. Well, first of all, I have to go into my toolbox and become familiar with the different shapes and sizes of these toolbox and say, okay, these exist. And then learning what is the purpose of this tool. Like this particular tool can be used to fix or mend this particular thing. And up until we don't realize what it is that we have within us, we won't know how to apply it. So that's been the inward journey. Is what are the tools that I was already gifted with from birth, and then how can I go ahead and utilize these tools and turn them into experiences in my life to show up kind of as the best version of myself, for myself as well as people around me.
Well, yes, the real challenge in seeing the qualities within, I think, are summarized. There's an old saying: when the mind is blind, the eyes cannot see. Meaning, when the mind is agitated and blinded by jealousy, anger, all the things that we're all subject to when something bad has happened to us, then we don't see that we do have within. So back to the conversation we had earlier about mindfulness, being able to calm the mind and to calm all those regrets that we are that monkey in our heads talking to us about from the past, and our worries about tomorrow is really key to this. So you mentioned your son a couple of times. How have you handled and raising a boy? Obviously, if it's not handled properly, as it is not in many cases, there can be emotional damage to the child. How have you and your ex worked to ensure that he is not damaged or traumatized by whatever may have gone on between the two of you?
Yeah, I think that's really important. With divorces, when you have children, of course, that becomes another layer of a challenge, or can be at least. Again, I use mindfulness and just, both as a mom, but also having a great passion to look at boys in our society and look at how they're being raised and the impact that we're having on them, is using the mindfulness tool so that they can be okay in whatever situation or experience that is going on in their present moment. So letting my son know that this is a safe space, and whether you want to freak out, whether you want to scream, whether you want to be happy, regardless of what emotion is going on, whether that's a positive emotion or a challenging emotion, just allowing him to know that it's a safe space to express and be whoever you are in this present moment.
How old is he now?
He's 7 now.
7.
So, I think a lot of times what we see is when we're talking about, or when we're hearing in the news about school shootings and, children committing suicide and all of this, you really start to wonder how much pressure and mental health challenges are going on in that child's mind. And for us to see a young child at that young and tender age to be going through these challenges breaks my heart. But I'm wondering, how often are these children being made to feel like they can show up in whatever space they're in, regardless of what they're experiencing? I think that's the biggest challenge, because are we saying being emotionally expressive, being sensitive, crying is a sign of weakness, or are we saying no, that's actually a sign of strength, because allowing yourself to be vulnerable is a form of courage that I think we all need to learn and embrace.
Right. So he's 7 years old. I haven't asked you this, but the Dalai Lama who has said many, many wise things, has said that if we could teach every 8-year-old to meditate, we could heal the planet of violence in one generation. So, have you taught him to meditate yet, or is that on you?
Yes. In fact, the faith that we follow also is also has always encouraged meditation. It's just something I didn't tap into then, but given that I'm more conscious of it and the impact of it now, I do get Ilian to, for the most part, as consistently as possible, do a meditation every day. I don't want it to be something that's a chore where he's rolling his eyes and saying, oh, do I have to? But I want him to understand the importance of it and actually enjoy it as a process. And so diversifying the practice of meditation as much as possible, incorporating some visualizations, perhaps, a happy place, the seaside, whatever it is that will bring him into the space where he's more welcoming and open to it rather than this is something you have to do.
Well, that will serve him well in many ways. As we know, the current generation and the one that he is a part of, which follows this one, is having to deal with something that none of us ever had to deal with as teenagers, which is social media.
Yeah.
And teenagers have always been the same, but now they've got the internet and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and all these other platforms on which to anonymously bully each other and say mean things and get embedded in our brain these self-limiting beliefs that are true, but that we never get rid of. I heard once that we never get out of high school because, our most formative years are those teen years, and we get wired into our brains self-limiting beliefs that we never can shake.
Right.
So I'm glad you're following that track. You've talked about raising a boy who will be a man someday, and you may be familiar. There was a recent study in the BMJ journal that divorced men are 8 times more likely to commit suicide uh, than married men or than other men. And so I'm wondering why men seem to have a harder time than women. It's certainly a heartbreaking experience for a woman, but when a divorced husband commits a murder or a suicide, it dwarfs the times you hear of a woman doing that. Any insights on why men have a harder time with divorce and heartbreak than women seem to?
Again, I think it's because men have not been wired to be in touch with the emotions. They haven't been wired or encouraged to admit where there's pain, and where things are hurting, and to show that vulnerability. And I think that's been going on for decades now. I feel that there is slowly this time where we're coming towards a shift where men are becoming aware of their emotions, but not only the awareness of it, but allowing themselves to show up and express it. There's some really great talks and TEDx talks that I have come across, and one of them in particular, I just actually sent it out to a friend of mine yesterday, and it's called what is it called? I'm Done Being Man Enough. And that TEDx talk is by Justin Baldoni. And Justin Baldoni is an actor, but it's a beautiful talk where he expresses how men need to be a little bit more open and come out with being more expressive as far as their emotions are concerned, and that being sensitive does not make you any weaker. There's actually a strength and courage in that, and just being vulnerable and open. And so I think that that's probably why, because when these difficult emotions arise, when you've been hurt, there's a way of dealing with this, in a fight or flight mode where, maybe it's the way to cope with it is to get really engrossed and busy in your work, or maybe it's jumping into another relationship. Whatever the case may be, how healthy are these ways that we're coping? And maybe they're not doing any of those things. Maybe that's why the suicide rates are so high, because they're not able to be open and honest.
Well, Farahana, I think you're right. And there was a famous bestseller book called Men Are From Mars, Women From Venus, which talked about this very point, that women will talk at great length, much to the consternation of their husbands, about what's to the husband seems to be meaningless nothing for an hour and a half on the phone when it's really women bonding and talking to each other about their feelings. When a man only wants to know, if you have a problem, tell me what it is and I'll fix it. If not, I don't want to hear about it. And men never talk to each other about these issues. So I think you're probably spot on there. Well, anyway, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be here today, and particularly being willing to share your story and your experience. And I especially want to wish you the very best of luck with the service that you are providing to law firms and their clients. It is a novel idea, and it is one that is sorely needed. So to our listeners, thank you for listening. And if you or someone close to you has been through a divorce, I hope you find this episode to have been helpful. See you next episode. Thank you for listening.